Welcome back to the Mythic Dungeon International as we're getting ready for our second series in the upper quarters between Team D and who we seen recently sleep? Black Mamba, Reborn.
Earth. Trick question.
I know.
You certainly didn't forget the team name or anything like that.
Never. You know. I mean, there's always little trickery. There's always little changes around. Like you can change around in the Transmorpher beacon. Did you know that?
No, tell me more about it, please.
Did you know that it supports WoW Esports?
It does?
Yeah.
This is very WoW Esports cast right now.
It is. Well, you know what it means by supporting WoW Esports, right?
No.
Don't?
I don't. Please tell us.
Nagura, can you tell us?
Have you ever heard about Twitch Prime?
Come on! The Transmorpher Beacon and the Horde Alliance fireworks, of course, will be bolstering that prize pool better than any affix ever could for the end of the year for BlizzCon for that grand championship. So we're getting ourselves ready between Team D and Black Mamba onto this one's ironic, and we're going into Siege of Borealis. So we saw this already once before when you got to see that amazing Demon Hunter play with Buff War. What are we looking at on this one? What are your thoughts as some of these teams are going to start editing some strategies or changing some things around?
I think we're probably going to... Well, what I'm looking at in this dungeon is this the same Team D that we saw last series of Cups? Because they were probably the most impressive team out of any of the teams. Now, Battle for Champion did end up having more points in the first set of Cups, but they're not here anymore. They were the only team that could consistently beat Team D. So if Team D is playing anywhere near as strong as they were in the first set of Cups, they shouldn't get beaten by anyone, especially with the way Buff War, Nerf Rogue, and Black Mamba have been playing.
That's a good point, but they were also a couple seconds behind. Not by too much. They were a couple seconds behind before Nerf Rogue in the time trials. So that's one of those kind of examples of, you know, when we look at Method EU, for example, how they compare to Method NA in the West, and the time trials getting a little bit closer together. We started seeing the performance get a little bit closer together throughout it. So be very interesting to see which Team D we see today as we get ourselves started for Game 1 in Borealis.
In Borealis, and both teams right off the bat just checking out here. We actually have Horde side for Team D. Actually, Horde side on both teams right now. We can see the Arcane Torrents present on Black Mamba side and, of course, on Team D side as well as they rush down through the lower rampart area of the dungeon. Looks like both teams, Nagura, opting to skip as much of that trash as possible and get over to that first boss's room as quick as they can.
Yeah, one more thing to note about Team D is that they're running the same comp as they were running in spring season. They're not running this DK that they usually run. So in the very first week of the spring season of the Eastern weekend, they were the ones who were kind of trendsetting this DK. They were running DK in every single dungeon. They only caved in the second week where they actually were switching out the DK for the Windwalker Monk. So interesting to see that they're not running this DK while Black Mamba, on the other hand, choosing to do. So we see the only difference here is, of course, the Windwalker versus the DK. We'll see whoever does better in this dungeon. Utility-wise, Windwalker should be doing better, right? Because most of the mobs are going to be killed, but they're spotted later on. But damage-wise, we've seen DK shine, especially in those really huge AoE pools.
Yeah, but it's like you said, though. I mean, those huge AoE pools will be handled largely by the spotter. But, I mean, whatever damage you can get on top of it, it's not like the spotter one-shots them, especially as we don't have a Raging present that we did on the West Cup before. Nonetheless, Black Mamba here has gone ahead and popped Bloodlust on that first boss. Sergeant Bainbridge, of course, is the boss present here instead of Captain Red Hook for the Horde versus the Alliance side. Bombs finally have come down as they do well to kite through that bomb and get as much damage as they can in right now. But moving over, BL Wong, making sure he rounds up all of these adds together.
Yeah, so we see the Bloodlust being popped here as well on the first boss. Now, this usually should not be a super big deal for these teams. We've seen some teams struggle, but only if the healer died because, you know, it didn't kite it properly or was playing too risky, got hit by a bomb, stuff like that. Otherwise, there's not huge problems at all because most of the adds are just being either cleaved down or they're being CC'd throughout the fight, so they don't have to deal with them. Of course, you just want to single target down the boss because those adds, they will stop respawning if you just keep them up on the Horde side. On the Lion side, they keep spawning no matter what you do with the adds, but on the Horde side, if you just keep them alive, the Vanguards, they will not continue to spawn, so you can just constantly off-tank them. Of course, it's a little bit annoying for the tank with the Necrotic, but the tank can just choose to kite if he feels like it's gonna be a problem.
Another advantage for those scumbag Horde, am I right, Nagura? Alliance always has it hard in these dungeons. Black Mamba rocketing past that first boss right now and pulling all these Marauders on the side, being careful careful not to get too many debuffs too quickly on BL Wong here right now, as the Wave Shipper gets killed as well. They get ready to move on towards that first spotter, which is where the dungeon starts to take a turn with efficiency. But they decide not to listen to what I'm saying and pull the commander on the side first and just deal with that before moving on. We can see the Courtyard marksman well CC'd by that Paralyze over on the side of Team D, who has now rejoined us in the fold. Just had a bit of observer lag there for the moment, but everything has been stabilized. Sergeant Bainbridge about to go down here for Team D as they rush off to meet their counterparts, Black Mamba on the side. A bit behind on the boss Nagura, but 6% trash advantage here, so pretty even overall.
Yeah, it's definitely even, and I want to see just like consistent play out of Black Mamba here, because Black Mamba had a lot of trouble in the previous game where they won 2-0, but they were playing very sloppily. They had lots of deaths, they were making many mistakes, and Moon was specifically saying that he was very nervous before the first Barrow match. So hopefully they got their nerves under control and they're actually playing a lot better here, because they will have to do so if they want to win against Team D. But so far it's looking really well. They have 0 deaths, they're doing well. It's a different strategy that both of those teams are running, as you mentioned. Team D killed the boss a little bit later, but they're ahead in trash, so it's still very even between those two. But we'll see. I think the most crucial part is going to be after the second boss, to see what those two teams are going to do with the spotter.
Yeah, that's really where the dungeon takes a nasty turn. There's just a huge amount of trash that they deal with. High trash density, a lot of tricks with the spotter, a lot of danger coming in from the commanders on the tank. We have necrotics going off. Of course, the snipers that do their ricochet cast on all of the members of the party. So just a lot of danger that comes in, but we'll see when we get there first as they run in, making sure to tag everything on the side. They're getting all the percentage that they need, as Black Mamba is likely to kill off their first spotter pretty soon. Team D not far behind right now as they line of sight around the corner. You could see the Enchanted, or the Arcane Emissary, if you will, trying to get into the pack there as they look to just bump it out of the way. because he's Spinning Craigie doing his job there. Unfortunately, the artillery does target Monk there, Loon, and he just misses one of the strikes on the Wave Shaper, but should be enough to finish it off there as they get ready to pull big in just a moment that we saw Black Mamba do. But Black Mamba, I was just...
Wait, I'm actually sorry.
No, I know you're going to go ahead.
It's okay, so the druid is running the glyph that he cannot carry someone, a body on his back, and that's why the DK had to die here, because he has no way of jumping. So he didn't put him on his back and didn't jump over.
I was looking at whether... I was like, I know you're going to say the DK died. I didn't realize that's why he died. You get that smile off your face, Akira. You teach those druids.
That is so selfish. I love it.
All right. Yeah, I think you've got enough ideas for live playing what to do with poor Jack on the back there. But Dread Captain Lockwood has been engaged here from Black Mamba right now, who are sitting at 31% trash on the board. And it looks like they've quite aggressively combined it with some of the trash in front of them. Oh my god, the Unholy DK gets down to about 1% HP. Manages to heal up though, as Wong has 29 stacks of Necrotic right now. They're in transition phase of the boss, but he's not able to shake off these Necrotic stacks. 31, that is just too much to handle right now.
Yeah, he might be able to taunt off, someone might be able to taunt off, but there's so many mobs, so he can't taunt off all of them. And maybe some sort of C will help him out here, but he just continues to stack up, as you see, 35, 36, so he definitely has to watch out what he's going to do here and how he's going to stay alive, because he's basically immune to healing at this point. The rest of the dude spamming Regrowth is not really going to help him at all with those 40 stacks.
He's at 40 stacks, he's 80% unhealable right now, and both rogues chasing these mobs around. He just refreshed at 41, and both rogues chasing the mobs around proc their cheap death from the cannon barrage coming in from the boat during transition. Wong needs to get rid of these stacks. He's at 46 right now. He's almost literally unhealable. 4 more stacks and he will be completely unhealable as he tries to get away from these mobs, and the DK does well to finally grip in, finally gets a breath of relief as he charges back into Dread Captain Lockwood here, resetting his stacks. We get a bit of a Visions proc here from Lyke right now that buffs his teammates, of course, with haste as a result. We do know that's what that rank 3 essence does. Team D here moving in, getting ready to pull the boss themselves as well, dealing with a fair bit of the trash compared to Black Mamba, but has not yet pulled the boss. So similar story, but further developed that we saw from the first boss there, Nagura.
Yeah, definitely. 59%. So they only have 40% left at this point. We see the staff being procced for the rest of the Black Mamba side here. We see Moon go down, actually. They do have 1 battle rest, and it's going to get casted immediately here to get him back up. Captain Lockwood on 40%. This is a 45 setting, and at this point, they're taking so long to kill this boss, just because, I mean, they didn't have a wipe or anything, but because of the tank struggling so much with the necrotic stacks, everyone had to help him out to try to reset it, and therefore the boss is just taking so long. Well, Team D can catch up at this point. I mean, they might not even be behind, which we're not sure yet, just because they're so far ahead in trash. It will totally depend on what those teams are going to do right after this boss.
We can see the food buff there present on Moon from the battle res coming in from the Druid. We do know that is one of the Azerite traits they can take. So just a neat little fact there as a Fish Feast does come down for the cheetah form there of the rest of Druid. Eats up quickly, gets that mana up as they get ready to get to what we kind of talked about earlier, the very dangerous part of the dungeon where there's a lot of trash that they need to combine together. We already saw some, I don't want, sloppy is the wrong word, but very daring play with necrotic stacks earlier from Wong that got up to 46 stacks on the previous boss. A lot of bananas here and a lot of slipping that can be done on those bananas, so the team has to be really careful with a very dangerous pool that's come in here. They don't have a Bloodlust to overcast on it either, as Team D works on actually almost killing the boss already, so they're catching up big time right now.
Yeah, so one of the rogues just got feared by the demo here, and also got stunned by the banana afterwards while still having the cloak ready. And the tank actually dropping really low as he starts kiting here. This is very dangerous, and we've seen a strategy before with this Vengeance Demon Hunter where they would just gather everything up, mass fear it, and then try to kill it with a spotter, just because how dangerous these mobs are, as we can see right here on Black Mamba's side. It's so difficult because if with a full melee lineup, you just have to dodge those bananas, you have to dodge the fear that is coming out, the frontal from the demo, which does a lot of damage to the slam. And the closer you are to those Buccaneers, the less cast time there is for the bananas to land. The further away you are, the easier they are to dodge. But if you're very close to them, they almost immediately spawn, and it's really hard to dodge. So melees definitely have a harder time. But rogues do have their cloak ready, so in case something goes wrong, they can always use that one.
Yes, and Gurney's plenty of times demonstrated for us how the range can get hit by those bananas as well. Black Mamba now at 48%, dealing with the final Buccaneer. And Team D, I mean, is just starting to run away with this one. They already had a pretty massive trash advantage post-second boss, which they cut up pretty substantially on because of just way less sloppy pulls compared to Black Mamba. They've managed to do a bit of a pull downstairs here. This is essentially where the dock, the pier, is just off to the side. There's a little passageway after the village area. I don't think I've seen a team pull through here since like season 1 or something, so interesting that they're only dealing with a double mob here. Perhaps they're just trying to get themselves in a prime position for dealing with for grabbing one of the mass stealths from the rogue. Nonetheless, we'll see exactly what they do here as they get up to 63% trash, poke back out, and they're getting ready to move through. They can't exactly stealth through here because there's that void touch emissary, and it looks like they're just going to try to brute force this one down.
I had to double check and look at Team D stat because I've never actually been down there at the dock area, so very interesting to see that they pulled that down. It reminds me of Court of Stars, where people will pull everything to the dock at the very start of the dungeon, so very interesting strategy by Team D coming out here. And we see a Ring of Peace usage as well. Now, when it comes to utility, Windwalker compared to DK, I think for the Ring of Peace is just so invaluable for stacking up the mobs here, especially because of the spotter strategy that you're trying to do, right? The DK does have the single target grip, but it's not going to be as efficient as this Ring of Peace, just keeping all of the mobs together and also helping with the emissaries as well at the same time, while you kill everything with this artillery coming down. And you can see the very beautiful strategy here by Team D, as they have 4 CCs on those snipers and just try to kill them before they can cast any ability, because the artillery does not actually break CC, as you can see right here.
Yeah, it doesn't indeed. You get double sap and the double blind coming in, and they do excellent job of tagging the mobs right before they die, because if they were to let them die completely from the spotter, they would actually not get percentage from them. So that's why we have that shockwave come up right away from U-Claps just at the very end to make sure that they get that percent. They head downstairs right now with the spotter just to get a quick 3 cappers on the mobs, getting them to probably about 80% before they do what I would assume is the pretty substantial pull in Hadal's room, the 3rd boss of the dungeon. Black Mamba having their own issues right now as they do a pretty big pull themselves. A lot of damage coming in as Wong sits at around 50% HP, Like 7 as well at around 50% HP, so a lot of damage cut out for them, and unfortunately Light gets clipped by one of the Void Emissary casts and almost dips down. Does not have cheat death available, should be coming up in just a few seconds. A lot of damage coming in on Wong right now, not able to clean those necrotic stacks, and he goes down here. Unholy DK follows suit, and everybody's scrambling to try and finish off this pack right now. I mean, finally the Eden's about to go down. I'm actually not sure what health he has right now, but it looks like a pretty desperate situation as the rest of Druid runs away. Everything's going Wong here in Agura.
Yeah, Wong is stunned by Banana again. So the reason why he died was he got stunned by Banana, and now he comes back and gets stunned by Banana twice. So Wong definitely having some trouble with these slippery bananas on the floor. You know, if you're a damage dealer and you get stunned by Banana, it's only gonna be a problem if you get hit by another ability on top of that you can't dodge because of the stun. But if you're a tank and you get stunned, then you're gonna have a lot bigger problems than a DPS. So Wong definitely making some mistakes here, but they did recover now and managed to finish off this pull. This cost them quite a bit of time, as they now are on 8 deaths, meaning 40 seconds difference. And on top of that, Team D is already way further into the dungeon as they pulled the boss room now, popping their Bloodlust.
Popping their Bloodlust, and the Tree of Life has been busted out here from the Resto Druid on the side of Team D, who just pumps out as much healing with his dangerous pull as he can. The mobs are slowly tried to kite it through at least some of those artillery blasts. A couple of those missed on the side, but fortunately the Ursul's Vortex going down from the Resto Druid is enough to just get them back in. We do know that the commanders are not privy to the damage from the spotter, so you will have to just DPS them down normally as 5 seconds remains on their Bloodlust, and they're sitting at 96% on trash, which should be pretty much just enough with these two mobs for them to get 100% before they move on to the third boss. Black Mamba, everything is just so slow for them right now, Nagura. They finished the boss first. They were obviously behind on percent trash, but everything's so slow. I don't think they've been using the spotter for pretty much any of this or most of this. And so they're just kind of trying to raw throughput through it, and they're finally only now getting up to the snipers.
Yeah, we see how they handle these snipers here, because Team D did it beautifully. They didn't have a single cast go through, and it seems like Black Mamba is trying more of a brute force strategy as he just charged in and had a stun go up. But you can see how much damage those snipers are doing if you don't play around properly with them, because the casts are random shoots. They're gonna target random members. They just does so much damage, especially if you get targeted by multiple of them. As you can see just how low they are dropping by all those casts going through.
Yeah, I mean, just a lot of damage coming in. We mentioned it earlier, those ricochets from the snipers. I mean, there's a reason you see the teams just absolutely don't even touch them. They just get quadruple CC up, crowd control up on the mobs, and then just let that go through. Team D now halfway through Hadal Darkfathom encounter, as we see Hadal Darkfathom's energy bar at the bottom. That is something finally that we've added here to the MDI UI. You can see the boss's energy bars, which have obviously several abilities depending on the boss. In the case of Hadal Darkfathom here, he will have that wave cast that goes through just to make sure that we can keep an eye on that. So once again, Hadal Darkfathom 25% here, about to cast his next wave, and Nagura, it looks like you just threw up your hands in disgust or anger or happiness. I'm not sure which one. What happened?
They finished off the spotter on Black Mamba's side, so they still have the whole trash left in Darkfathom's room, and they're just gonna do it without the spotter. I assume this was a planned thing to do, as they were all running to the spotter, focusing it down, killing it off. So interesting. Like, I wonder what this is about. Maybe they had to go out of combat. Maybe the healer had to drink. I don't know. There was probably something going on. If it wasn't an intended strategy, then it's a very weird strategy, because how are you going to deal with all of this room without the spotter? You're going to be much slower if you do so. So there must have been a reason behind this, as they do actually still pull the whole room without a spotter and just popping their Bloodlust.
And they commit their Bloodlust. Like, I mean, it's kill or be killed right now for them here. The tank can only survive so long. A lot of damage coming in on Moon right now. Just barely gets healed up. He had some aggro, which is why he has the necrotic stacks. And same with Like right now, just making the poor Resto Druid's life so hard, as BL Wong is now at 42, I believe, stacks of necrotic. Finally gets a dispel for the 5 stack of poison that are coming in from the mobs. Wong runs all the way downstairs, of course. We know that the commander cannot get crowd control, but manages to get far away enough just for those necrotic stocks to drop. So it looks like they managed to pull it off, but once again, I mean, why not just include the spotter with that? That would have been faster. A bunch of free damage down the drain. Team D already working here on Viq'Goth. Gripping Terror has been killed as they work off to finish the demolishing, as they have the cool tier and NPC, of course, fix that cannon.
Yeah, so one more time I want to mention that the reason why those teams are not pulling the spotters through this end boss anymore like they did in the spring final in Australia is, of course, because it did get fixed, and those tentacles are not damageable anymore by the artillery from the spotter. So no reason to drag the spotter down here. This means that the boss is going to take a little bit longer, and how this boss works is basically that you want to kill the gripping tentacle on each of this platform to be able to shoot the boss and continue to the next platform. Now there's demolishers spawning on each platform that do spawn on a timer, and the more demolishers you get, the longer it takes, of course, because those demolishers do need to be tanked. So if you go all out on the gripping tentacle and you spawn 2 or 3 demolishers, you're probably going to wipe, because if they're not tanked, there's going to be a huge AoE on the whole group. We also see the other mechanic here where the rogues just got knocked into the water. This is because of this debuff that you can see right now in one of the rogues that needs to be dispelled by the healer that does do ticking damage, and there's a circle around them. If you dispel and there's anyone around you, you will knock them apart.
Well, the Rogue is going for a swim down there as he gets tentacled from the bottom. That's what happens if you spend too long in the water. So that's going to be all she wrote for Mog. And this is actually particularly daunting for the team because they're committing to an all-in strategy here where they're trying to kill the gripping before too many demolishing spawn. They've already had a second demolishing spawn, fortunately close to that gripping, so one of the rogues can just off-tank it. If nobody's within melee range of these grippings, demolishings, excuse me, you're going to have Hullcracker get cast on the group, and it's just an immense amount of damage that will wipe you. So pretty disastrous situation right now. I believe Mog has been finally able to rejoin the team, and they kill off that gripping just in time. Late in their Arcanas, of course, were channeled. They didn't have the Bloodlust, so that was almost disastrous for the team. But Team D manages to squeeze by an almost flawless run, except for the end there, Nagura. That was looking a bit scary, but Team D manages to squeeze out the victory, and that was, I think that's the first time ever that we've seen somebody get gripped by that tentacle within any of the cups we've done so far this year.
I think you're right, yeah. I
didn't even know that was a thing.
Well, it was kind of funny as Nagura was starting to explain all the mechanics, and I was like thinking in the back of my head, I was like, oh yeah, if they stay in there long enough, they'll get the constricting tentacle, and I was like, oh, well, it probably won't ever. Oh my god, it just happened. It just happened. But one of the first times that we've seen it, but it's ironic, even though Team D was almost a minute behind on Dread Captain Lockwood, they just pulled through so hard in the second part of the dungeon.
Yeah, I mean, they absolutely demolished this dungeon. And like you mentioned, they were a minute behind a Dread Captain, but they had 22% more trash. They had 60% trash by the time they even got the Dread Captain, whereas Black Mamba had 38%. So this was a really weird strategy. We haven't seen any other Western team pull off the strategy where they have more trash in the start of the dungeon. Most Western teams opt to go for more trash in the second half of the dungeon. So maybe this is Team D also, once again innovating, coming up with their own strategies. And I mean, looking at the way they're playing right now, it pretty much confirmed what we were talking about when it comes to Team D. With Battle for Champion gone, so far this cup, nobody has really played like they're going to be able to take out Team D as long as they keep playing like this.
Yeah, as this has been our first view of them in Season 3, it's been great to start seeing, hey, not only from the beginning, they're starting to innovate. They're starting to change things around from what we're kind of used to. So very interesting to start seeing their return to this, and we're definitely not going to want to miss the next series. So don't go anywhere, guys. Game 2 coming up on the other side of this break. Welcome back as we're getting ourselves ready for Game 2, and it's going to be on Waycrest Manor. So we saw that raging, quaking, tyrannical combination coming out before. I'm really excited for this one and start seeing what Team D can do.
Me too.
Thanks.
So we just...
Zyro, 3 words this time.
Yes.
I'll do a little more than 3 words.
Okay.
This is Team D's dungeon. Remember, go back to last cup where Team D came up with a strategy in Waycrest Manor in week 1 that every single Western team copied. I want to see if they can even innovate and go further, or if they're just going to show us the route that's pretty much already perfect already. I mean, we saw them run on Holy DK here first. They did a lot of damage, and it was just a very clean strategy in general.
You're going to have 2 words this time, Sloot.
Okay. But we're going to have to see coming out of the team because, we were commenting earlier that Team D was the same team as last season, but they're actually not. So we failed to mention that their tank is now one of their damage dealers, and they have a new tank in at the moment. So I'm not sure exactly who the creative mind, perhaps between some of their pulls and creativity and innovation, was for last season, but it is a slightly different Team D than we saw in the last season, excuse me.
And that, without question, starts changing up how you're working with your healer, how, the tank is now fitting in as a DPS, how these teams are all going to start working together. So when we're looking at these dungeons, as you mentioned, Zyro, it's going to be a lot different when there's a different tank at the wheel. So Game 2 coming up right now between Team D and Black Mamba. Let's get it started in Waycrest.
Wong and Uclap right away joining their teams up the stairs and up to the left. Nagura, in the West we saw this group being pulled in front on top of the Void Emissary and just dealing with it there, but no such luck from the East teams as they get right in on the Triad.
Yeah, we see the Bloodlust being popped as well for both of the teams. Both straight going to try using that Bloodlust here now. Compared to the spring cups, we do have Tyrannical here now instead of the 45 that we had before. So all of the bosses are going to be a little bit more difficult. But we see teams still just pulling trash on top of it, as we see Black Mamba pulling one of the side moves here, the Acolytes, which is very dangerous just because not only do these sisters have an aura that is getting applied to everyone, and the first one being a 50% healing reduction aura, but there's also lots of casts that need to interrupt on the boss, and then you also want to interrupt casts from the Acolyte. So So at some point, you're just going to run out of interrupts. And if casts go through, it gets more difficult for the healer to heal. As you can also see, both of the healers doing 50k and 60k HPS.
Yeah, unfortunately, a second round of AoE burst goes out on the side of Team D right now, but they managed to stabilize. Sister Briar starting up here, getting her Jagged Tettle spell ready, and finally nailing Ab with it, unfortunately, who was not topped off. They don't have a battle res, and Team D right out the get-go. I mean, man, Zyro was just saying if they play like this, no one can beat them. Zyro is just cursed, and he has cursed his team for the rest of time. Ab goes down. They have no choice but to force reset. This is a very, very healer-heavy fight, and there's no way they're completing an entire second round on that boss with other healers. So complete reset from the encounters. Everybody Shadow Melds off. They get their healer up as Long gets out of combat, casts that res, and they get ready to go again. We see Tree of Life here popped from Black Mamba, who's now about to deal with their second round of damage phase.
He can't heal off the Nettle, so you can see Moon, he still has the debuff, which does apply a grievous effect until you heal the person above 90% HP. And Moon, the Restorer is not able to out-heal it, even though he is in Tree of Life form, which is a huge cooldown. Finally, he managed to get off the debuff, but it took him so much mana to get rid of this. And I think the same thing happened to Ab. He just died to the Nettle's debuff on top of Quaking. Now, Quaking does not seem like a very dangerous affix to deal with, but if you have so much group damage going on, then it definitely can cause trouble, especially if it overlaps with something like the Nettle's debuff.
But hang on, Resto Master Nagura, I'm pretty sure you don't consume mana in Tree of Life form, right?
You do.
You do?
Yeah.
You sure? Okay. So he's pumping out regrowths there, but the problem is the combination really that was very detrimental is those Jagged Nettles hit at the very end of the Sister Briar phase. So when they went back to the first phase of, the second phase of Sister Selena, what happened was you were sitting there in a situation where you were doing 50% reduced healing on somebody that was ticking rapidly in a tyrannical environment from Jagged Nettle. So that's why I was just having so much trouble. In fact, he probably would have died if he didn't have Tree Form there.
Yeah,
so
definitely.
So fortunately for them, that was the pick. But unfortunately for them, they now don't have access to their Ashara staff either. Envy's did proc it earlier. Big pull coming up here from Black Mamba in the Waycrest Manor courtyard right in front of Soulbound Goliath. A lot of damage coming in as they try to finish off this Void Emissary before it finishes them off.
This Quaking just seems so dangerous. It was like almost the worst timing to come out of, and we see the DK going down, and one more damage dealer going down here as the rest of it is actually getting stunned, and now they're gonna have a full team wipe come in for Black Mamba here. So this huge pull that they're trying to do in this courtyard here on top of the Void Touch Emissary just not working out for them, as I believe the DK just failed to line of sight or use any sort of defensives to survive the first AoE cast, and then everything just going downhill from there, just a chain reaction, everything just going down. And now that they're all of them released, they're actually pulling some of the soul shards here. I'm not completely sure if they intended to do this or if they're just adjusting their route because of this full team wipe coming in.
Well, they had to because they physically couldn't move past it. It was guarding the door on the side that was just now open, so they had to pull this one to get by in the first place, which they're doing now as they cleave down one of the captains. Envy's, of course, the Resto Druid having his work cut out for him. Certainly not envious of that on the side of Black Mamba. Everybody's just standing in line of sight as Team D is backtracked into the hallway. Something we've seen in the previous seasons as well, coming for some of the teams. They'll finish off the Triad and then go back in the hallway to do some of this trash fracture percentage, which is exactly what they're doing here, and they've combined it with that Void Touched Emissary forcibly. Of course, it is present in the middle of the stairwell there. Cleaved it down. Acolyte is present here. Ab getting a couple of Soul Harassment before they get ready to likely move into the courtyard. Big pull coming in here from Black Mamba, though.
Yeah,
really
Black Mamba trying to do the same thing again. Now, this is a pull I wiped to before. Fortunately, the Void Emissary actually does not heal up to full HP. If you have a wipe on it, it will just stay in the same HP as you left it for. So it's going to be a lot easier for them to finish it off this time around. And without the Void Touch Emissary, they should be able to finish off this pull a lot easier this time around. As I say that, the DK just drops because there's just so many casts going through. You can see the debuffs on everybody. These Disease and Wong going down too. This is going to be a full team wipe again. Now, if you have the Thorn Shapers just constantly cast, which just happened right now, and you have all these diseases on everyone, which is a druid cannot dispel diseases, then everyone is going to drop, especially on top of raging, because the disease increases damage down when the mob are in raging range.
But you know who can dispel diseases is their monk, and their monk didn't because DPS brain. Am I right, Nigra, on this one? So a lot of struggles coming in here for Black Mamba. 2 wipes in the courtyard, just biting off more than they can chew right now. 11 deaths on the board versus Team D's 1. 1, which of course they had Abdi to spike damage from Jagged Tettles in the beginning of the dungeon, of course, at the first phase of Sister Briar earlier. So they've managed to stabilize from that as they're spreading out for the Quaking in the Courtyard. They've already dealt with a bunch of the trash in there as they chisel and work their way towards the Soulbound Goliath. Now, we've seen rather aggressive pulls come out of teams on top of the Soulbound Goliath usually here, but they're trying to get rid of that Emissary of the Tide so they can pull the 2 Thorn Shapers, which of course cannot be interrupted or crown controlled if that Emissary of the Tides was present, which it's not. But now it is. And has joined the rest of the group there. They just didn't have enough CC time on it, so they're not going to be able to interrupt the Thorn Shapers, which do have that very dangerous Soul Fetish cast.
Please cloak, Moon, you have cloak. Oh, okay, so he actually survived, but he did have 2 debuffs. He had 2 diseases on him from the Thorn Shapers, and I just saw his HP drop and drop and drop, and he did have Cloak available and just did not use it. Now, again, Raging is just an affix that makes this dungeon so much more difficult because Waycrest has a bunch of random debuffs that get applied to your group, and if the mobs are raging and they only do tank damage, then it's not going to be such a big deal because the tank can just start kiting and you can just avoid all damage done, or damage taken rather. But if you have random debuffs on the whole group, like the Spit debuff from the Maggots that we're going to see later on, and this disease here from the Thorn Shapers, then once all of those mobs go into raging at the very same time, the damage you take is just going to be increased in the whole group, which makes it much more difficult to deal with. And of course, it can be dispelled by the rest of the group with Soothe, but it does have a 10-second cooldown, so you can only dispel that many.
Yeah, you can only really rely on the rest of Druid or whatever Druid's group present in the group at the time to really just dispel major mobs like Matron Brindle or Matron Alma further downstairs in the hallway, which most teams don't really pull these days. Actually, never really pulled. We've seen a couple of strats veer off that course and do it, but Wong here tanking Soulbound Goliath, who is now at 77% versus Team D, who's at 40% trash. 9 have just now pulled Soulbound Goliath and have combined more trash on top of the Soulbound Goliath. So certainly sitting pretty here, Team D.
Yeah, Team D definitely, even with a little bit of a struggle that they had earlier, like Mamba, with these 2 team wipes coming in, just having 11 deaths, causing so much trouble. Like, Team D only has 1 death, but it was a pretty huge death, as it was on the boss for Ab. So they did have to reset the whole boss, they lost their Bloodlust. So even though they did have such a huge setback on their side, Black Mamba just having those 2 major wipes, full team wipes on the trash to set them back even further than that. Now, Soulbound Goliath should not be a super dangerous boss, especially with no affixes really affecting it outside of the Quaking, but you can definitely have some trouble with it if you tank the boss too long and let the stack on the boss go up way too high before you drag the boss into the fire, because the damage buff on Goliath actually increases all his damage done. So once you drag him into the fire, if you have been not dragging him in for a long time, then the AoE that you can see right now will be increased as well. So you definitely want to make sure that you don't tank it too long, even though Prot Warriors are able to do so if they wanted to.
Yeah, if they wanted to. I mean, it's just a trade-off. How long can you take the tank damage for in order to make your life easier on the healer, but not, nuke the group and wipe it up? So they're having a good ebb and flow, nice balance here for Black Mamba as they hit about to hit 20% on Soulbound Goliath versus the 40% on Team D. So they're maintaining about that 19-20% gap between the 2 teams, which is what they started the boss at, showing that they have a roughly equivalent single target damage coming in on this boss. Now the efficiency, of course, in the ballpark rather, for Soulbound Goliath, as they did manage to combine it with some extra trash from the side. So the 38% trash that they started the boss with has now gone up to 44% in favor of Team D, was able to do so with the affixes present to them. A lot of damage coming in here for Black Mamba as they do 1 final reset on Soulbound Goliath, but Envy's having a lot of trouble healing this up as finally they managed to stabilize, and Soulbound Goliath should be falling here in just a moment as long as Wong does not fall first.
Yeah, there was a very unfortunate Quaking coming through there as the boss was getting dragged into the fire, and on top of that a Thorns cast was coming out as well, and the healer can be targeted by the Thorns. So but if you shapeshift as a druid into cat or bear form or whichever form, then you're actually immune to the Thorns. So you want to be shapeshifting, but of course in a shapeshift form not only is it a global, but you also can't heal in another form. So if it overlaps with a fire, it's very, very unlucky. That's why you usually want to drag the boss into a fire right right after a Thorns cast, so you don't get the Thorns overlapping with the AoE. As Black Mamba, actually their healer going down as he had so many spit debuffs from the maggots on him.
Yeah, just a bit of a mispull there. Not only that, but he got an Infest cast off. They pulled the entire hallway here. Fortunately, they do have the Unholy DK presence. He was able to get the battle res off on Envy's, who has now rezzed up, but Tree of Life got interrupted halfway through and managed to just, trying to save himself of staff procced again, but doesn't matter. It doesn't have any charges. Goes down. Light goes down accordingly. Wong doing what he can to stay alive, but these mobs, some of them are raging, some of them are 50, 60% HP. There is no way he's going to stay alive long enough. He should be falling, as will the Unholy DK, and Moon will follow suit in just a moment, and that is another full team wipe. Disaster here for Team D as well, as UClap goes down, Battle Res comes up, they look to finish off the rest of these maggots, but the pull size here for Team D is not nearly as dangerous and bad as it was for Black Mamba. Nagur, they tried to do the entire hallway. They tried to do the snap on top of the desk that we saw in the west earlier. Some of the mobs were not aggroed on Wong, so he wasn't snap. You can't snap mobs that aren't aggroed on top of you. They were actually, in fact, aggroed on the healer, and they finished him off, and everything just unraveled from there.
Yeah, they have the DK, right? So they have to do those kind of pulls. They have to play around the DK. They have to make this work. But this is so dangerous. I've been talking about this raging, right? Having these random spit debuffs on everybody, the Gorger bleed, that if it jumps and you leave a bleed behind. If all of them go into raging at the very same time, your team is just going to fall apart. Everyone's just going to die. So what we've seen in the spring season, actually, is that the DKs would hold their damage for a little bit if there was a raging affix, to make sure that they're bursting everything down once they're raging and not early, because if you burst all your damage at 100% HP and then the damage stops once they're in the raging range, then your whole team is just going to fall apart. So therefore you should save your damage a little bit and then burst later on to make sure that you're bursting through the raging.
Through the ranging, indeed. Team D here has now moved into the lodge, or living room area, if you will, of the Waycrest Manor, pulling up the Survivalist and finishing off whatever they can here, making sure to avoid those explosive traps on the side. 43% trash on the board for Black Mamba, as they just relentlessly didn't give up and did a pretty equally large pull as they did that wiped them earlier. Envy's doing what he can to keep the group, healthy through all the spit debuffs going up, but here's a Quaking that is likely to chunk them down pretty far. Envy's particularly low health, tries to heal himself up and manage to do so with, I believe, a crit regrowth there. That's a pretty substantial hit on him. 18 deaths on the board for them, though, as Team D has done an entire room pull, minus actually the pack in the corner. That pack makes me extremely nervous because I feel like he could get pulled at any second, and they'll have to be on the ball grabbing those emissaries. They probably will pull it at some point, but they want to do it on their terms to make sure that that enchanted emissary does not join the rest of the group in here.
Yeah, you can also see Ab struggling a little bit to keep everyone alive with those random debuffs on everyone. They still do have their Bloodlust ready, so I'm not sure what exactly they want to save it for. Maybe a substantial pull later on the next boss. We also see Black Mamba holding their Bloodlust as well, which is weird because they did this insane pull that you talked about earlier where they had the full team wipe and they just didn't use it. Maybe they should have used it there, as their DK is going down again. You can see the DK just playing such an important role in their strategy, in their pulling strategy, but it's just not working out as the DK just goes down again on one more of those pulls. They can finish off the pull, but it's just gonna cost them so much trouble and so much time lost again.
Yeah, the only role he's playing right now is eating dirt on the ground as they get ready to res him. 19 deaths on the board here for Black Mamba right now. Team D only 2 deaths, looking much, much cleaner in their run. We're all here at 44% for the team. They still have that pack in the corner. I don't know, it's just making me so nervous. I feel like somebody's just gonna back up accidentally. Finally, we see the weapon throw go in on their terms as the revelers, the 3 revelers, get pulled in on top of Rawl, and we do have some proper crowd control / damage going in on that enchanted emissary. 20 seconds if it is needed in order for it to start teleporting out of the dungeon to give you your percent, and Rawl is now at 23. I'm wondering if they're going to pull the kitchen on top of it, but I don't think they will, because there is a void emissary in there, if I'm not mistaken, and the last thing you want is a void emissary pulsing from the kitchen into this room. Actually, I've done that on live. There is a point where you can line of sight it, but it is a nightmare to deal with, so that's likely why you will not see teams dragging the trash from the kitchen and on top of the boss during a void heavy week.
So Black Mamba finally using their Bloodlust as they engage Rawl and engage the whole room as well, the whole room of trash on top of Rawl. They also pulled the emissaries at the same time, and the rest of it was just dealing with it, making sure it stays away with that vortex and the typhoon, as Team D is already done with Rawl, making their way down the basement. Now they're only they need 13% of trash at this point, and the 2 bosses that are left, of course, and they also have their bloodlust available. So not many pulls left for Team D to do. As Black Mamba seemed like they were doing bigger trash pulls, but they're behind in trash, so they were actually much less efficient compared to Team D. Team D just pulling out of trash, maybe slower, but they were still pulling it on top of bosses. You don't have to pull everything at once. As long as you kill everything at the end of the boss, it's going to be just as efficient.
So Team D opting to actually backtrack technically a bit to the other entrance of the basement, which is in the Triad wing. By doing so, they avoided 2 Void Emissaries along the way, one of course in the kitchen and one just below the kitchen, and therefore just had an easier time doing the skip, something that we saw almost go disastrous in the previous Waycrest Manor that we saw earlier today. So a bit of backtracking at the benefit of mass safety in the skip that they're doing as they aggressively pull Lord and Lady Waycrest on top of all the trash on the bottom, except for, once again, there is that Void Emissary hiding in the corner of the room near one of the Diviners as well, one of the Soul Charmers, so they want to make sure not to pull that on top of the boss, and if they do, they'll have to play line of sight for the remainder of this encounter. Lord Waycrest now on his 2nd round of 100% health. We do know you have to do that 3 times over. As always, before Lady Waycrest will join him on the fight. We're all here for Black Mamba, who is at 74% trash, about to fall as well.
Yeah, so one thing to note is that they still did not use their bloodlust here on Team D side. That means they probably want to pull some of those crawlers that we're going to see right after this boss on top of the last boss, I assume, and save their bloodlust all the way up until that point. Now, this boss, Lord Waycrest and Lady Waycrest, usually not too dangerous outside of tank damage in the 2nd phase, but in the 1st phase, Lady Waycrest actually shoots those missiles that you can see on random team members, and if it overlaps with one of those disease debuffs as you've seen just on the Windwalker, then it can actually be dangerous because it's a little bit RNG on who gets hit by it, and if you get hit multiple times in a row, then you can drop very low.
Yeah, certainly the last thing you want is a death here at the end. They do have a battle res available to them if they need, but they're also just so far ahead. Yeah. Not even in raw progression through the dungeon, but also 17 death difference, 85 seconds between the 2 teams right now. I mean, there's no... we gotta stop saying there's no way they're gonna lose this because we've seen throws happen at the end of dungeons. I remember a couple in the West Cup too, but it would take an absolute miracle for them to forfeit the rest of this dungeon, or to fail the rest of this dungeon, excuse me. So Team D here, 93%, about to finish off. They're doing a nice cleave strategy, always more DPS efficient, but more dangerous as a result of a higher double mechanic uptime on the team. But no problem for this well-trained Team D right now. That is, I mean, you're absolutely right, Igor. They're probably just going to pull the remaining 7 Gloom Horrors on top of Gorak Tool at the end, and there's Bloodlust that, and try to cleave them down as quick as possible before the danger gets out of hand for the tank.
Yeah, Black Mamba just still not being able to shake off those nerfs, as we've seen, like almost all of the dungeons they've played so far. They just had those big mistakes. I don't think it was even their strategies that was the problem. It was mostly the execution, right? They had those good strategies, they had those huge pulls that they were doing, and they just failed to execute it properly, which I can just see the DK doing a lot of damage here in this pull as well. And we see the Tree of Life being propped by the Residue on Black Mamba's side. They do not have a bloodlust, and they do not have a battle rest ready, so they want to make sure they execute this pull properly. But again, Team D on the other side, they already in the last boss, they pulled those Gloom Horrors, as you mentioned, on top of this boss, while also using that bloodlust that they've saved up until this point. And we can see App is standing on this ledge in the corner to make sure that Horrors are not actually jumping and just continue to hit the tank.
App, of course, having proactive staff just a bit earlier, just making sure everyone's nice and safe. Here comes the Raging, though, on top of Team D. This is where a lot of danger comes in, which is why you see the support from that Ring of Peace from Long go down on top of a U-Clap. Huge amounts of damage that would come on top of the tank, but is no problem as they finish off the remainder of those Gloom Horrors, hit 100% on the trash, and now the only thing that stands between them and securing a 2-0 in the series is 60% remaining on Gorak Tool. There's no way they're losing this one.
You said it again. What if they
there is literally absolutely no way they are losing this dungeon.
So we've seen some strategy changes when it comes to the spring season. We actually seen some teams in the past backtrack after this boss, talk to the NPC, get teleported to the entrance, and clear some more trash, which most teams have stopped doing because that always seemed like a very questionable strategy that the teams pulled off. But Team D, of course, being the inventors of this DK strategy, basically in this Waycrest where we've seen the 1 million DPS, interesting to see that they just don't want to pull off this DK anymore and just did more more of a conventional strategy here, and it's still paying off for them. Very clean run. They did have 2 deaths, which again cost them quite a bit of time even on the first Triad boss, but outside of that they had a very good recovery and, you know, just way ahead to Black Mamba.
Way ahead indeed. Gorakto about to fall here as he hits 5% for Team D, and we weren't able to see them at the beginning of the day just because of the forfeit that had come in from Team 430, but that doesn't matter. They've shown that they're one of the best teams and continue to be one of the best teams in the East as they finish the series 2-0.
Quick 2-0 sweep for Team D in their first appearance of this next season. So very impressive performance there on Waycrest Manor, despite the rocky start. I thought at first, as I wrote, you were saying, this is their dungeon. This is something they're going to master. Then right off the bat, there was the wipe to it. I was like, oh no. But Black Mamba definitely threw very hard through some of their wipes and through some of their failed attempts, and Team D capitalized on it and just smooth sailing after that.
Yeah, and I don't really want to compare Team D to Black Mamba here too much, because Black Mamba just kind of, they didn't have a good dungeon at all. They had way too many wipes overall. But we see here the very first wipe that Team D had. I think what we're going to see with Team D throughout them in these tournaments and these cups is that the only team that's really going to have a potential to beat Team D is Team D themselves. I mean, they only had that one particular wipe, but that was a reset. And comparing their time to what Buff War and Nerf Rogue did the other in the previous match, Team D was only about 10 to 20 seconds slower with that full boss reset, which shows how fast they're going, and they don't even have their DK. And actually, to clarify a little bit on what we were talking about earlier, their tank and their DPS actually ended up swapping positions, and I'm pretty sure it was Yusheng who was playing the DK for them before. So maybe one of the rogues hadn't practiced DK for this, and maybe they'll be playing it for another tournament, but that's probably why we didn't see the DK in this dungeon.
Got it. Thank you for that, Zyro. As we're seeing Team D moving on, and they are going to be squaring off against Buff War Nerf Rogue for tomorrow.